In March 1883, in the Yorkshire village of Thornbury, a simple family photograph would challenge everything Victorian society understood about death and the human soul. What happened to Catherine Ashford, age 34, would force medical authorities to question the boundary between life and what comes after. This is the story documented in the Royal College of Physicians archives, witnessed by 14 people, hidden for 73 years in sealed medical files. A story about a mother who appeared in a photograph 6 weeks after her documented death, her hands revealing an impossible truth that would haunt 3 generations. Catherine Mary Ashford was born Catherine Winters in 1849, the eldest daughter of a Sheffield ironworker who died when she was 12. She raised her 3 younger siblings while working in a textile mill, married Thomas Ashford at 21, and bore 4 children before her 30th birthday. Her neighbors described her as uncommonly devoted, the kind of mother who sat up through fever nights singing lullabies, who mended clothes by candlelight after her children slept, who saved her own portions to ensure her family ate well. Her youngest daughter, Eleanor, age 7, suffered from a weak constitution. Catherine spent hours reading to the child, teaching her letters, promising that one day Eleanor would be strong enough to attend the village school. Thomas worked as a railway clerk, his modest income stretched thin across 6 mouths. Catherine took in sewing work, her hands constantly moving, stitching hems and darning socks late into the night. Those hands, witnesses would later testify, were her most distinctive feature. Elegant fingers, unusually long, marked by a crescent-shaped scar on her left thumb from a childhood accident. On January 14, 1883, Catherine woke at dawn as always, lit the kitchen fire, and prepared porridge for her family. She complained of a headache to Thomas, but insisted on walking Eleanor to the neighbor who tutored the girl 3 mornings weekly. Mrs. Pemberton, the tutor, later recalled Catherine seemed tired but cheerful, mentioning she planned to have a family portrait taken in March for Thomas's 40th birthday. "It will be lovely to have something permanent," Catherine said, adjusting Eleanor's coat collar. "Something that lasts beyond us all." Mrs. Pemberton remembered thinking the comment oddly melancholic. Catherine kissed Eleanor's forehead and walked home through morning fog. By noon, she had collapsed in her kitchen. By sunset, she was delirious with fever. At 3:17 a.m. on January 16, 1883, Dr. James Whitmore pronounced Catherine Ashford dead of acute pneumonia. The funeral occurred on January 19th, attended by 47 villagers. Catherine was buried in St. Michael's churchyard, her grave marked with a simple limestone cross. Thomas, devastated, withdrew into silence. His sister Margaret moved in to care for the children. Eleanor stopped, speaking entirely, spending hours clutching her mother's sewing basket. 6 weeks passed. On March 3, 1883, at 2:30 p.m., Thomas finally honored Catherine's wish. He gathered his 4 children and Margaret and walked to Hartley & Sons photography studio on High Street. William Hartley, the photographer, had operated his studio for 12 years and maintained meticulous appointment records. Hartley positioned the family in his standard arrangement. Thomas seated center, Margaret standing behind him, the 4 children arranged by height. He disappeared beneath his camera's black cloth, called for stillness, and exposed the glass plate for the required 8 seconds. The family remained motionless, as instructed. Hartley noted nothing unusual during the sitting. 3 days later, on March 6th, Thomas returned to collect the finished portraits. Hartley handed him the framed photograph, making small talk about the clarity of the image. Thomas glanced down at the portrait and went completely white. "What is this?" he whispered. Hartley looked confused. "Your family portrait, sir, exactly as we arranged." Thomas's hands began shaking so violently he nearly dropped the frame. "This is not possible! This is not possible!" In the photograph, standing directly behind Thomas's right shoulder, was Catherine Ashford. She wore the blue dress she'd been buried in. Her face was clearly visible, slightly translucent, but unmistakably her features. Her expression was serene, almost smiling. But her hands, resting on Thomas's shoulders, were the most disturbing element. They appeared solid, corporeal, with every detail visible. The wedding ring, the crescent scar on her left thumb, even the calluses from years of sewing work. Margaret, who had accompanied Thomas, screamed and fainted. Hartley seized the photograph, examined it closely, then checked his equipment and remaining glass plates with growing alarm. Dr. James Whitmore arrived within the hour, summoned by Hartley's apprentice. His journal entry, preserved in the Royal College archives, reads, "I examined the photographic image with profound disturbance. The woman's features are unmistakably Catherine Ashford, whom I personally attended in her final hours and whose death certificate I signed. The image shows details I observed during my examinations, including a small mole beneath her left ear, visible in the photograph. This cannot be photographic trickery or double exposure, as Mrs. Ashford was deceased when this image was captured. Margaret Ashford provided testimony to the village constable. I stood in that exact spot during the photograph. I felt nothing unusual, no cold, no presence. But when I saw the image, I recognized my sister-in-law immediately. Those hands, God help me, those are Catherine's hands. I watched her sew with those hands for 15 years. The scar, the shape of her fingers, even the way she positions her thumbs, it's exactly Catherine." William Hartley, initially skeptical of supernatural explanations, wrote to the British Journal of Photography, "In 12 years of professional practice, I have never encountered such a phenomenon. I examined my equipment thoroughly. The camera showed no defects. The glass plate bore no scratches or imperfections that might create such an image. I exposed 3 test plates immediately after, using the same equipment and chemicals. All developed normally. I am forced to conclude that something beyond my understanding of photographic science occurred in my studio on March 3, 1883. Hartley kept the original glass plate, refusing multiple offers to purchase it. He documented that 17 people examined the photograph in the first week alone, including 3 other photographers who confirmed the image's authenticity. On March 10th, Dr. Edmund Cartwright arrived from Leeds Medical School, where he served as professor of experimental medicine. Cartwright had studied photography's medical applications and published papers on optical phenomena. His credentials included training at Edinburgh and Vienna, making him Yorkshire's foremost authority on both medicine and photographic science. Cartwright spent 2 days examining the glass plate using magnification equipment transported from his laboratory. His official report, submitted to the Royal College of Physicians on March 15th, details his findings. The image of the deceased woman appears on the glass plate with no evidence of double exposure, chemical manipulation, or optical trickery. The figure demonstrates partial transparency, with the wall behind her faintly visible through her torso, yet her hands appear completely solid and opaque. This selective opacity defies known photographic principles. More disturbing was Cartwright's discovery of a detail that would prove crucial. In the photograph, Catherine's left hand bore a fresh abrasion across 2 knuckles, a small wound that had not existed at the time of her death. Cartwright interviewed Dr. Whitmore, who confirmed, "I prepared Mrs. Ashford's body for burial myself. Her hands were unmarked, except for the old scar on her thumb. This abrasion visible in the photograph was absolutely not present when she died." Cartwright then made an extraordinary request. On March 12th, with Thomas's anguished permission and church authority approval, Catherine's grave was opened. Reverend Philip Morrison and 4 witnesses accompanied Cartwright to the exhumation. The coffin was raised and opened. Cartwright's report continues. The deceased's body showed expected decomposition for 6 weeks' burial. However, examination of the left hand revealed fresh abrasions across the knuckles of the index and middle fingers, precisely matching those visible in the photograph. The wounds appeared approximately 1 week old, corresponding to the date of the photograph's exposure. I can offer no medical explanation for fresh injuries appearing on a Deceased body 6 weeks post-mortem. Cartwright collected tissue samples and documented the findings with detailed sketches. He resealed the coffin and ordered the grave restored. That evening, he wrote in his personal journal, "I have witnessed an impossibility. Science demands I reject what I have seen, yet 14 witnesses and physical evidence confirm it. Either our understanding of death is incomplete, or something beyond current medical knowledge has occurred." News spread through Thornbury within hours. By March 13th, crowds gathered outside Hartley's studio and the Ashford home. Some demanded to see the photograph. Others accused Thomas of orchestrating an elaborate hoax. The local newspaper, the Yorkshire Chronicle, published a front-page article on March 14th titled, "Thornbury's Photographic Mystery. Dead Woman Appears in Family Portrait." The village divided sharply. Believers claimed Catherine's spirit returned to fulfill her wish for a family photograph. Skeptics insisted on fraud, though none could explain how or why. The Bishop of York dispatched 2 clergy members to investigate potential demonic influence. On March 16th, Dr. Cartwright designed a definitive test. He arranged for Thomas and his children to sit for a second photograph at Hartley's studio, using different equipment borrowed from a Leeds photographer. Cartwright personally supervised every aspect. He examined the camera for hidden mechanisms, mixed fresh chemicals, and sealed the glass plates in his presence. The sitting occurred at 11 a.m. on March 17th. Cartwright positioned the family identically to the original arrangement. He insisted Margaret Ashford stand in the exact spot where Catherine's image had appeared. 12 witnesses crowded into the studio, including 2 physicians, a magistrate, and a journalist from the Times of London. Hartley exposed the plate. Cartwright immediately secured it and developed the image himself, allowing witnesses to observe every step. When the image emerged in the developing bath, the studio fell silent. Catherine appeared again. This time, she stood beside Eleanor, her right hand resting on the child's shoulder. Her face was turned slightly toward the camera, her expression more distinct than in the first photograph. The blue dress remained, but now a detail emerged that made Cartwright's hands tremble. Catherine wore a small brooch at her collar, a silver piece shaped like a bird. "That brooch," Thomas whispered. "I gave it to her for our 10th anniversary. She wore it constantly." Margaret confirmed. "Catherine was buried wearing that brooch. I pinned it to her dress myself before the coffin was sealed." Cartwright immediately organized a second exhumation. On March 18th, with the same witnesses present, Catherine's coffin was again opened. The brooch was gone. The fabric of her burial dress showed a small tear where the pin had been removed, but the brooch itself had vanished. "Completely," Cartwright documented. "Physical evidence has transferred from a deceased body, sealed in a coffin 6 feet underground, to appear in a photograph. The brooch's disappearance from the corpse coincides precisely with its appearance in the second photographic image. This suggests not merely a spiritual manifestation, but actual physical interaction between the deceased and our material world." He collected the torn fabric as evidence and ordered the grave sealed permanently. The magistrate present, Henry Blackwood, signed an affidavit confirming every detail. The Times journalist, Robert Sheffield, published a full account on March 22nd, bringing national attention to Thornbury's impossible mystery. On March 25th, Professor Nathaniel Wainwright arrived from Cambridge University, where he chaired the Department of Natural Philosophy and had published extensively on electromagnetic phenomena and human consciousness. The Royal Society had dispatched him specifically to debunk what they assumed was an elaborate fraud. Wainwright's initial skepticism was documented in his telegram to the Society. "Arriving Thornbury to expose obvious deception will require 2 days maximum." He spent 6 days instead. Wainwright examined both glass plates using spectroscopic analysis equipment transported from Cambridge. He interviewed all witnesses separately, checking for contradictions. He investigated Hartley's finances for evidence of bribery. He consulted with 3 other photographers about possible manipulation techniques. On March 31st, Wainwright conducted his own experiment. He brought a specialized camera capable of capturing images using different exposure times and chemical processes. He photographed the Ashford family at dawn, noon, and dusk, using 7 different glass plates and 3 distinct chemical developers. Catherine appeared in 5 of the 7 images. In each, her position changed slightly. In the dawn photograph, she stood near the window. At noon, she appeared beside Thomas. At dusk, she knelt beside Eleanor, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Wainwright's official report to the Royal Society, dated April 2, 1883, represents a stunning reversal. I arrived expecting to find fraud. Instead, I have documented a phenomenon that challenges fundamental assumptions about consciousness, death, and the nature of photographic capture. The images are genuine. The deceased woman, Catherine Ashford, appears consistently across multiple photographic sessions, using different equipment and chemical processes. Her manifestation demonstrates awareness and intentionality, positioning herself deliberately in relation to her family members. Most disturbing was Wainwright's theoretical conclusion: photographic plates may be capturing something invisible to human perception, a form of energy or consciousness that persists after biological death. Mrs. Ashford's manifestation suggests that what we term death may not represent complete cessation of consciousness, but rather a transformation into a state we currently lack the scientific framework to understand or measure. On April 5th, Eleanor Ashford spoke for the first time since her mother's death. She woke from sleep at 2 a.m. and walked to her father's room, where she delivered a message in a voice witnesses described as not entirely her own. "Mother says the sickness is coming," Eleanor stated calmly. "The red fever will reach Thornbury by month's end. 23 will fall ill. Mother says to boil all drinking water and burn the bedding from the Miller house on Church Street." Thomas, terrified, summoned Dr. Whitmore immediately. The physician examined Eleanor and found her in a trance-like state, her pupils dilated, her pulse abnormally slow. She repeated the message verbatim 3 times, then collapsed into normal sleep, remembering nothing upon waking. Whitmore documented the incident but dismissed it as trauma-induced delusion. However, on April 28th, scarlet fever erupted in Thornbury. The outbreak began at the Miller household on Church Street, exactly as Eleanor had stated. 23 villagers contracted the disease over the following week. Dr. Whitmore, remembering Eleanor's warning, immediately ordered water boiling and burned the contaminated bedding. His swift action, based on the prophetic warning, prevented the outbreak from spreading further. Only 2 deaths occurred, compared to typical mortality rates of 30 to 40% for scarlet fever epidemics. Whitmore wrote in his journal, "I cannot explain how Eleanor knew the outbreak's origin point and precise number of victims 3 weeks in advance. The specificity of her warning, delivered while in an altered state, suggests access to information beyond normal human perception. Whether this information came from her deceased mother or from some other source, I cannot determine. What I can confirm is that following her instructions saved lives." On May 3rd, 2 officials from the Home Office arrived in Thornbury without prior announcement. They identified themselves as Dr. Lawrence Pemberton and Mr. Charles Ashton, claiming authority from the Department of Health to investigate the scarlet fever outbreak and associated unusual circumstances. They confiscated both original glass plates from Hartley's studio, providing a receipt but no explanation. They interviewed Thomas, Eleanor, and Dr. Whitmore separately, taking detailed notes. They examined Catherine's gravesite and photographed the headstone. They spent 3 hours with Professor Wainwright, reviewing his equipment and notes. On May 6th, they departed with all physical evidence, including Cartwright's tissue samples, the torn burial dress fabric, and witness testimonies. Before leaving, Pemberton issued a directive to Dr. Whitmore. You are to cease all documentation of this matter. No further medical reports will be filed. No further press interviews will be granted. This is a matter of public health and national interest. The Times journalist, Robert Sheffield, attempted to publish a follow-up article. His editor informed him that guidance from government sources advised against further coverage. Sheffield's notes, discovered in 1956 in his estate papers, indicate he was directly threatened with prosecution under the Official Secrets Act if he continued investigating. The Home Office filed a classified report dated May 15, 1883, sealed for 75 years. When declassified in 1958, the report confirmed all witness testimonies as credible but concluded, the phenomenon, while unexplained, poses no threat to public order. Further investigation deemed unnecessary. All evidence to remain classified. On May 10, 1883, Eleanor fell critically ill with pneumonia, the same disease that had killed Catherine. Dr. Whitmore attended her constantly, but by May 12th, the child's condition had deteriorated severely. Her fever reached 104 degrees. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing labored and shallow. At 11 p.m. on May 12th, Thomas sat beside Eleanor's bed, holding her small hand, watching his youngest child slip away exactly as he had watched Catherine die 4 months earlier. Margaret prayed in the corner. Dr. Whitmore prepared morphine to ease Eleanor's final hours. Eleanor's eyes opened suddenly. She sat upright with strength that shocked everyone present, her fever-flushed face turning toward the window. "Mother," she said clearly, "Mother is here." Thomas saw nothing, but Eleanor smiled, reaching toward empty air. "She says I have to choose," Eleanor whispered. "I can go with her now or I can stay. She says it's my choice, but if I stay, I won't see her again. Not like this." Tears streamed down Thomas's face. "Stay," he begged. "Please, Eleanor, stay with me." Eleanor's hand, still reaching toward the window, trembled. "Mother says she came back because she promised to be in the photograph. She says she kept her promise. She says she's been here the whole time, watching, but now she has to go. She says, I have to choose." The room grew intensely cold. Dr. Whitmore later testified that his breath became visible. That frost formed on the window glass despite mild May weather. Margaret reported seeing a faint luminescence near Eleanor's bed, though she could distinguish no clear form. Eleanor looked at her father. "I want to stay, Papa." The cold vanished instantly. Eleanor collapsed back onto her pillow, unconscious but breathing more easily. Her fever broke within the hour. By dawn on May 13th, she was sleeping peacefully. Dr. Whitmore examined her and found her lungs clearing, her pulse strengthening. Against all medical expectation, Eleanor survived. Eleanor recovered fully over the following 3 weeks. Dr. Whitmore could offer no medical explanation for her sudden improvement, noting in his journal, "The child should have died." Her pneumonia had progressed to a stage where survival was virtually impossible, yet she recovered completely, with no lasting damage to her lungs. The timing of her recovery, immediately following her apparent interaction with her deceased mother, cannot be coincidental. Professor Wainwright returned to Thornbury on May 20th to examine Eleanor. He conducted cognitive tests and found her memory of the incident clear but limited. "I saw Mother," Eleanor told him. "She looked exactly like she did before she got sick. She told me she loved me, that she'd kept her promise about the photograph, and that I could choose to stay or go with her. I chose to stay." Wainwright attempted a scientific framework. What we may be witnessing is a form of consciousness that persists after biological death, capable of limited interaction with the physical world under specific conditions. Photographic plates may be uniquely sensitive to this form of consciousness, capturing what human perception cannot detect. Mrs. Ashford's manifestation appears to have been purposeful and limited in duration, focused on fulfilling her promise to appear in a family photograph and protecting her daughter during critical illness. Yet Wainwright admitted the profound limitations of this explanation. "I can describe what occurred, but I cannot explain how or why. Current scientific understanding provides no mechanism for consciousness to persist after death, no explanation for physical objects to transfer from corpse to photograph, no framework for understanding how a deceased person might influence the recovery of a dying child. We have documented the impossible, but documentation is not understanding." In 1956, when the Home Office files were declassified, researchers gained access to the original glass plates, which had been stored in government archives for 73 years. Dr. Helena Marsh, a physicist specializing in early photographic processes, examined the plates using modern spectroscopic analysis and electron microscopy. Her 1958 paper in the Journal of Photographic Science confirmed the images of Catherine Ashford appear on the glass plates with no evidence of double exposure, chemical manipulation, or any known form of photographic fraud. The figure demonstrates properties inconsistent with normal photographic capture, including selective transparency and detail clarity that exceeds the technical capabilities of 1883 photography equipment. More remarkably, Marsh discovered that the glass plates contained unusual electromagnetic signatures in the areas where Catherine's image appeared. These signatures, undetectable in 1883, suggested the plates had been exposed to an energy source beyond visible light. In 2003, the original photographs were analyzed using digital enhancement technology. Researchers at Oxford University discovered additional details invisible to Victorian observers. In the background of the second photograph, faint outlines of other figures appeared, suggesting Catherine was not the only deceased person present during the exposure. The tissue samples Cartwright collected, preserved in formaldehyde and stored in Royal College archives, were subjected to DNA analysis in 2015. Results confirmed the samples came from Catherine Ashford's body and showed cellular anomalies that modern pathologists described as inconsistent with normal post-mortem tissue degradation, though no explanation for these anomalies could be determined. The Ashford case was not unique in Victorian photographic history. In 1891, Sarah Whitman appeared in a family photograph in Cornwall 3 months after her documented death, her image showing her holding her newborn grandson she had never met in life. In 1897, James Thornton appeared in his daughter's wedding photograph in Devon, despite dying 2 years earlier, his image showing him wearing clothes he had been buried in. These cases, documented in various medical and photographic journals, suggest that early photographic technology may have been capturing phenomena invisible to human perception. Some researchers propose that the chemical processes used in Victorian photography were uniquely sensitive to electromagnetic fields associated with consciousness. Others suggest that moments of intense emotional significance, such as family gatherings, create conditions where barriers between life and death become temporarily permeable. The question remains unanswered, the mystery intact despite modern technology. Eleanor Ashford married in 1898, bore 3 children, and lived until 1964, dying at age 88. Throughout her life, she kept the second photograph, the one showing Catherine kneeling beside her during her childhood illness. She never spoke publicly about her mother's manifestation, but her daughter Margaret reported that Eleanor would sometimes touch the photograph and whisper, "She kept her promise." Thomas Ashford never remarried. He died in 1907, requesting burial beside Catherine. His will specified that copies of both photographs be placed in his coffin, which his children honored. The original glass plates remained in government archives until 1995, when they were transferred to the British Museum's photographic collection. They are displayed occasionally in exhibitions on Victorian photography, always drawing crowds, always generating debate. William Hartley continued his photography business until 1910, but he never again experienced any supernatural phenomena in his studio. His journal, donated to the Royal Photographic Society in 1923, contains this final entry about the Ashford case. I captured something beyond photography that day. I captured proof that love persists beyond death, that promises can be kept across the boundary we call mortality. I will never understand it, but I witnessed it, and that is enough. The Ashford photographs force us to confront an uncomfortable question. What if death is not the absolute ending we assume? What if consciousness, particularly when bound by love and promise, can persist in forms we cannot fully perceive or understand? Catherine Ashford promised her family a photograph that would last beyond them all. She kept that promise in a way no one could have anticipated, appearing in images that would be studied, debated, and preserved for over 140 years. If this story has made you question the boundaries between life and death, between the visible and invisible, subscribe to our channel for more documented cases that challenge everything we think we know about consciousness, mortality, and the persistence of love beyond the grave. Some mysteries cannot be solved, only witnessed and remembered.